Welcome to Better Than We Found It, the podcast for leaders driven to leave a positive mark through their leadership.
I hope that I will have created some ways in which the circumstances of your birth don't predict the opportunities you have in your life.
I'm Josh Huggins, your host and the founder of GS2 Partnership, a search firm committed to connecting visionaries dedicated to environmental and social betterment.
I have 2 young sons. I want to be able to tell them I did use the resources and expertise of a company to try to create more awareness about climate change.
In each episode, we delve into the minds of executive and future leaders. We discuss how sustainability guides responsible leadership, sparks change, and drives value.
The way of thinking I try and advocate is for us all to think about us having a collective problem to fix, which is climate, and that we need to rebuild our global economy.
We are GS2, and we are on a critical journey to connect to those who believe in leaving the world better than we found it. Hello, Better Than We Found It audience. Welcome back to another episode with an exceptional purpose-driven leader. Today, that's not me, by the way. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Louise Scott, Chief Operating Officer for Global Sustainability at PwC. In this episode, we have a fascinating discussion focused around Louise's journey into the firm, what's retained her there for over or nearly 33 years, early stages within the organisation, her career pivot into sustainability, but also navigating being a senior female leader within the organisation, having children, and how to continue to progress your career in that period of time, all the way through to her current role, building out the skills, metrics and toolkits to help and enable the nearly 10,000 PwC employees who engage with clients on a daily basis around their sustainability challenges. I really hope you're going to enjoy it. Would love to hear your feedback. So let's dive right in. So, Louise, welcome to Better Than We Found It.
Thanks, Josh. Very nice to be here.
Wonderful. So I've done a little bit of an introduction before we started, but of course I can never do it as much justice as you can yourself. So would you mind, for the audience and those who don't know you, giving an overview of who you are, your current role and your remit and where that sits within your organisation?
Sure. So my name is Louise Scott. I'm the COO, so the Chief Operating Officer for our sustainability practice at PwC. So we have about 10,000 people across our network of territories that are consulting to clients on all manner of things to do with sustainability. And so I run the operations that support that network of people.
Sure. I suppose in the last few years, that's become increasingly popular and I'm sure busy in terms of your role. So I'm really keen to get into it and understand how you manage that. But as I like to do, rolling back the years and starting at the early stages of your life, it'll be good to hear a bit more about you, your childhood, and I suppose where purpose became apparent in your career. So yeah, tell me a bit about your childhood growing up. Where was it, and what was that like?
I think probably relatively unremarkable, actually. Grew up in Surrey, middle class parents. I'm in the middle. I've got 2 brothers, an older brother, a younger brother. Did pretty normal stuff like horse riding and playing the piano and playing tennis and studying. So nothing really extreme or remarkable, really. Quite normal.
Sure. Whereabouts in Surrey were you born?
A village called Woldingham, so just inside the M25, just by Godstone. So okay. On that sort of Surrey, Kent, Sussex border.
Oh, sure, because I'm the other.
So lovely countryside.
Good, yeah. I was born on the Surrey-Hampshire border, so I was the other side. But lots of friends and family in Surrey, more kind of the Guildford area. But I know that's quite well. But you mentioned the horse riding. I mean, was the environment or an appreciation for nature something that was passed on to you from your parents, or something that was important in those early years?
I mean, I think, to be honest, I really don't think it had any of the awareness. I think it was one of those things that we just took for granted, actually, and I don't think we hadn't started having the social issues, the unusual weather, there wasn't really very much publicity or awareness of environmental sustainability issues at all, I would say. And so I was born in 68. So, my growing up in teenage years was 70s and 80s. And I think that was before the sort of general awakening, before, the Rio summit and all of that sort of thing.
Sure, yeah, I understand. And I suppose sort of back then, and even now in some areas, but I suppose definitely back then, it was, I suppose, nature and the environment's always been seen as a bit of an infinite resource that, is always going to be there, will always be there. It was never really considered that it wouldn't be. So we'll come on to talk a bit more about that, but that's probably the mindset and mentality back then, I would assume.
Yeah, I think it very much the economics of the 70s was all about making money for shareholders, and I think there wasn't any appreciation of resources being scarce, of the impact that using resources would have on sort of future. I think you're right. I think people just took resources for granted.
For sure. So I was interested when we first started talking, and you mentioned that actually your initial degree was in the hotel management route. So tell us a bit about that, and I suppose how clear you were with your career pathway at that stage as to what you wanted to do and why hotel management was the place that you went down.
And I think it's interesting when you're making those choices at 17 or 18, you don't really know what you want to do. I'm just doing it now with my children. So I did think that I wanted to go into hotel management. I'd worked in a hotel and restaurant part-time at the weekends, really liked the people aspect of it, really interested in food. So yeah, I had thought that hotel management seemed like a really interesting career, and that's what I wanted to do. The degree I chose at the time, there were very few universities that did degrees in hospitality or hotel management. So the degree I chose was at Surrey University, and it was very much a business management degree. So there was elements of accounting and law, but as well, there were lots of focused hotel management courses like food and beverages and tourism. So it was a general business degree, but with everything sort of all the case studies and all the focus was on hotel and tourism.
Sure. And then following that, did you go into the industry?
No, actually, as I was coming up to graduate, I realised, and we did an industrial year, I really realised just how hard it is, hard work for very little money. And I've always been quite mathematical, so I did maths A-level. And so I decided that I would qualify to be a chartered accountant. And then my idea was that I would go back into the hotel industry, but with that level of financial understanding and background. So that was the plan. So I joined PwC with a plan to qualify as a chartered accountant, and then after a few years of experience to go back into hotels.
Sure, understand. And in joining PwC at that time with that background, I suppose now, and part of your role and remit must be to, when people come in, to give them a viewpoint of sustainability, and in any role it becomes part of it. But I suppose back then, sustainability probably wasn't something that was on the radar or being discussed within the firm.
Not really at all. Certainly not that I was aware of. I mean, I think we haven't. So I joined in 91, so 32 years ago. We've had a sustainability practice in the UK for about 20 years, and actually that's one of the oldest ones in the network, and probably for many professional services firms. But it was very, very small. So we've got about 18,000 people in the UK, and at the time we had a handful of people looking at sustainability sort of 20 years ago, and I would say nothing really 30 years ago. I think people did the odd bit of volunteering. So, we were starting to get sort of policies around people volunteering time and things, but it was nothing like the sort of the focus and the priority that it is now.
Sure. And I suppose in today's world, somebody staying within one firm for, what is it, 32
years, I know.
32 years is unheard of. So I'm sure there's been lots of different roles that you've undertaken there, which I want to talk about. But if you were to give an overview as to what it is about PwC that's retained you for that period of time, because that's pretty remarkable in the grand scheme of things now. What would be the sort of key things for you?
I think I've been very lucky that I've been able to move within the firm to different roles that have been really interesting. I think there's always been a culture within the firm of sort of looking after people, and I've always found that, I just found it a nice place to work. I think I've been lucky through the years with flexibility. So I've got 2 children who are now, very nearly grown adults, but there were many years where I wanted to work 3 days or 4 days. So there was quite a lot of flexibility. So I think a combination of flexibility and an ability to move between departments and between roles that I'd always found interesting. So I was always enjoying what I was doing and finding it interesting, and then being able to stretch myself into something else. There have been a few times where I've looked outside the firm, and I've made a conscious decision to investigate the market, and then have made a conscious decision to stay. So I have it. There have been times where I've considered it, but actually, I've always found that I think just the organisation, the people, the roles have been interesting and challenging, and but also allowed me the flex to have a family.
Sure, yes. And I hear lots of people and talk to lots of individuals that have gone into the Big Four, the MBBs, and the training, the development that they get when they initially go in, but then do decide to move into other areas. What would be some of the best pieces of leadership advice that you received in those early stages of your career within PwC that you think have kept you, sort of stayed with you and made you be, or help you to be as successful as you have been?
I think what's been interesting for me is I consider myself very lucky, and I've had some really good leaders that I've worked with that I've been able to learn from. So I spent 4 years working for someone called Ian Powell, who was the leader of the firm in the UK. And I think through working with different people who you admire or you respect, then you can take different pieces from each of them and see what resonates with you. So I think there's definitely something about authenticity and being yourself. I think when people aren't themselves or try to sort of pretend to be something that they're not, there's a disconnect in how they come across with people. So I think definitely being sort of authentic. I think it's really important to surround yourself by a really good team and rely on the team and give credit to the team. So I think, if someone in the team does a particularly good piece of work, then, that's down to them. And I always make a point of making sure I give credit to people when they've done stuff, which actually I think there's often there is a tendency for people to take credit for other people's work. A junior might do some work and then the senior will take credit for it. And I think actually it's a sign of strength if you say I've relied on the team and the team has done this brilliant piece of work. So I think definitely having a really good team that you rely on and give credit to and care about, like truly care about. And I think the other thing is also challenge debate. So I'm always very keen for there to be debate. I might have an opinion, and it might well be the right answer, but it might not be. So I think it's always really important to allow challenge and debate to encourage diversity of thinking.
Sure.
So so I think authenticity, great team, encourage challenge and debate and diversity.
For sure. And something that you mentioned just before that, giving around the flexibility as a talent solutions firm and executive search business focusing on some senior appointments, we see how within some organizations having children can affect the careers of females and what that looks like. When you got to that point, and perhaps we could talk a bit about what your role was at the stage that you had your children, how did you approach that time internally to continue to progress and to develop, and also what support did you have around you or internally to help you on that journey?
Yeah, I think it was a time when policies were just changing actually, and things were becoming much more flexible for women. I think they've continued to progress positively since then. We certainly, there was an awareness there was a lot of work being done at the time on women leaving the practice, senior women leaving the practice, and so they wanted to do what they could to encourage women to come back after maternity leave. So certainly for a few years, there was a policy where you got childcare vouchers for a year. So that really helped me in terms of, being able to afford to come back. And I think there was a recognition of an ability to change the role, change the number of days I worked. There was a lot of people trying to flex to accommodate balancing family with work. And I think everyone's going to do that very differently because people's circumstances are different, or their aspirations are different, or how they might have, backup at home is different. But I think, the flexibility to work a reduced number of hours, actually to work from home a bit, which is now, very much taken for granted. But, in the early days, very early days, we didn't have laptops. We had great big desktop computers. Yes. So then laptops coming meant actually you had more of an ability to work from anywhere. And as a firm, a lot of our staff would be working at client sites on laptops. So it's very common for us to be working off-site, which meant, in the pandemic, it was really easy for us to switch, immediately overnight to people working at home. So an ability to work at home and juggle. And I think the firm has to be flexible, but we have to be flexible as well. So, I did have to leave at 5 o'clock to go and do a nursery pickup. But then if there was something urgent, I'd look at it later on in the evening once kids are in bed. So I think you have to make it work as well. But I think flexibility on both sides was really important.
Yeah, understood. Something you mentioned there is how to pick up on, because I suppose I've probably shown my naivety and age. So given the fact that the work that you do, or the work the firm does, is very much client-led and a lot of work at client premises, back in the days before laptops, and how did that actually work? What did the consultants do when they were on client sites, was there always?
Well, actually, we were old school. It was pen and paper. Literally, in my first years in audit, so we'd go out on a Monday morning. We'd learn who we were going out to look at, and we'd collect paper, different coloured pencils. It was all done. It was all written. It was all written. So it wasn't electronic working papers. It was all. It wasn't quite slate and chalk, but it was coloured pencils and paper.
Yeah, and then back to the office to type all the notes up.
Yeah, or they weren't typed up. It was handwritten files. Yeah, the files just stayed handwritten, and that was it. We photocopied. There were big photocopies, so you'd photocopy something from a client's books or client's records, and everything would be written up and referenced. So very, very different to how we work now with everything electronic.
For sure, yeah, understood. So where were you at this in terms of your career trajectory when you had your children? What level were you at in the firm?
So I was promoted to director actually whilst I was pregnant with my first child. So I was actually trying to hide the bump until I'd got through the process, because I actually didn't want it to impact me positively or negatively. I wasn't sure if it would count against me or count for me, so I didn't. So I was hiding the bump when I got promoted to director, and I was in corporate finance. So I worked for 10 years we have quite a big corporate finance team, mostly helping private companies or the owners of private companies to buy, sell companies, private equity to invest in companies. So I did that for 10 years. Interestingly, mostly in the food sector, which sort of slightly went back to the hotel catering sort of interest. So I was doing M&A for sort of large private companies.
Sure. And when you looked ahead at that stage, in terms of the role models that were already at that level or beyond, that did have families. Was there much of a portfolio of those in the firm that you could get mentorship from, or even see as role models to actually just replicate?
Well, yeah. To be honest, there weren't really. I felt a bit of a responsibility to be a role model, and people said to me, you're being a role model, which I hadn't totally sort of appreciated. But then I felt a responsibility to to make it work and to show that it was possible. So my first child was born in 2003. So it was less common for directors, partners. There was definitely less female directors and partners with children. But it's dramatically changed, I'd say.
For sure. So from then until I think it was around 2012, you mentioned to me on our previous call that was when the pivot to the social and sustainability started to come back. What did you do in that period of time? You said there was flexibility. How did you create a place where you could still develop your career whilst working part-time, whilst raising your two young children? Because that's a juggle that I hear lots of females face in their careers.
Yes, it was a time of real juggling. What I did was I wanted to go part-time, and I actually worked part-time in M&A for a couple of years. And then when I had my second child, it became more difficult for me to juggle two children and M&A, which is quite unpredictable. So you need an element of predictability to organise your childcare around. So it was quite unpredictable, and you'd think you'd be able to leave at 5, and then suddenly something would happen and you'd have to be in a meeting all night. So that juggle was quite tricky. So I actually I started to do a non-client facing role, and I took over. Someone was taking a career break, and so I covered the career break of this person, and that was a strategy role for Ian Powell, who at the time was running our advisory business. So the business in the UK is broadly split into 3, our audit assurance business, the consulting business, and the tax business. So that consulting advisory business he was running. So I did a strategy role for him, which was just much more predictable and manageable within the kind of 9 to 5. And he then was elected to be the senior partner. So I carried on working for him as a sort of EA, chief of staff, for another couple of years, 2.5 years. And then at that point, I was thinking about returning to the business. So I think those chief of staff roles are fascinating, and you learn a huge amount, and you've access to, some really interesting debates and, management challenges at the top of the firm. But if you stay in that role for too long, then it's difficult to then do something else. So I decided I wanted to go back to the business. And at that point, the M&A business was it's quite cyclical, and it was in the doldrums, because it wasn't long after Lehman, so there was it wasn't a good time to be going into M&A. And I had run a special project for the board, setting up a social enterprise restaurant and hub that we have in London Bridge. And through working on that with our own corporate sustainability team, which was much, had grown over the years, and discovering really that we had this advisory business that was really fascinating, advising clients on sustainability, I decided to move to the sustainability team as my kind of back to the business option.
Back as in a consulting capacity for clients.
Actually, I was doing an operations role, so I guess taking the experience of chief of staff operations for the overall firm to then to apply that. So many of the people I've been working with at the firm-wide level then became people that helped me in that role as the ops lead for the sustainability team.
Sure. And as you say, a social enterprise project, but back into the original thing of kind of hotel and food and hospitality. So
yes,
it's quite nice how that all came together.
It was a perfect project for me because it was setting up a restaurant, which some of that hotel background came into the fore. But then we also needed to sort out the business plan, and we needed to find some investors and set up a whole set of agreements. So all of the M&A experience of, finding investors, all the legal, we had to have services agreements between PwC and it was quite a complicated set of agreements. So all of that together, I think the corporate finance experience was very, very helpful, as well as it then just being a fascinating project that felt really felt worthwhile. So what we've got is it's an old Grade 2 listed fire station, which sits just outside a very modern office building of ours at Moore London. And we decided to take the lease on it when we took the lease on the office building. There was a debate at the board level about what we should do with this space. And so it was decided to make it a social enterprise hub. So on the ground floor and the first floor is a fully functioning restaurant, but it's also a teaching kitchen. So we work with hostels, local homeless hostels in the borough, and have a sort of outreach program that then culminates in some people coming onto an apprenticeship, and they train and get an NVQ in different skills, and we then support them on after the apprenticeship into employment outside the firm. So that's on the first 2 floors, and then we also house something called the School for Social Entrepreneurs, which is a brilliant organisation that helps social entrepreneurs with their business, and they come periodically and they are matched with mentors. So that worked quite well with people in PwC being able to mentor at the school. And then the top floor is a healthcare operation where Blossoms Healthcare, where people from the firm can go and have medicals and see a GP. But it also provided healthcare for free to the apprentices, because often with the homelessness, there's a story that might involve medical issues, or so being able to offer them support in that way as well was a good kind of combination.
Wow. So how long was that project? Did that project take from, I suppose, sort of signing that lease, setting it up, getting it ready, and were you the individual that was running? Were you running that project? Is that what the role was there for you?
Yeah, so it was a couple of years, I'd say, from start to finish. The board had decided to do it before I was involved, although I'd heard the discussion. But then I think they wanted someone to project manage it. So I was project managing all the various elements of what funding do we need to raise. We were challenged by the board to find someone that could help us operate the restaurant, because as a firm we're not restaurant operators. So we reached out to De Vere, amongst others, but De Vere were very keen to support the purpose of the restaurant and to help us run it. So that sort of professionalised all of the front of house. And we were working with a very inspirational chef called Simon Boyle, who'd been running a programme connecting with homeless people in the crypt of a church that was across the water by St Catherine's. So it was all sort of connected and very local. So yes, I was project managing various elements and working with all of our facilities management team, the funding teams, the marketing team. Yeah, it was a lot of people being pulled into a lot of different work streams.
Yeah, and this, I suppose, sort of links back to sustainability in its wider format of how cross-functional it needs to be and embedded into an organisation, which I'd like to talk to you about in a second. But just firstly, so how did you talk project managing that that social enterprise move into the practice of sustainability, and how did that role evolve and adapt over the course of the next few years, where I'm sure that the practice was growing pretty significantly?
Well, I think what was interesting is when I joined, it was a relatively small practice, and as coming in from outside and coming in from other parts of the firm, I was able to help bring some structure, looking at commercial arrangements, just looking at how we, organize the team, organize the people. And to an extent, I'm kind of, that's happening all over. As everything's getting bigger, it's getting more complicated. So therefore, you need to sort of build in more and more. So I think actually the skills that I've built through various different roles had helped then think about, how to commercialize the team a little bit, how to professionalize things, how to just structure and organize things a bit more.
Sure. So what did the practice look like in terms of growth over the next 6-7 years? And what was the strategy from your role as an internal person in that wider business?
So actually, for the first few years, it was very much about supporting the network of SMEs that were around the network. And there were probably about 700 people across 30 odd of our territories who were consulting to clients on sustainability. But it was in the very, very early days of people, recognizing there were issues, recognizing it was important. Typically, sustainability officers were down the end of a corridor. They'd never had any budget. So it wasn't really seen as strategic, and it was quite small projects, but that were very varied in terms of what we were doing. So we were doing quite a bit of work for some government aid agencies where they had international development funds, and we'd help sort of run the funds, work out where the funding should go, and then look at what the impact was. So early signs of thinking about impact for spend, particularly in sort of in places like Africa. We did quite a lot of work in Africa. I think there was a tipping point, and we'd always said it's going to become strategic. It is going to be big for business, and I think the M&A years of experience really helped me think about what matters for business and have a real sort of, how do you make this sort of business speak, chief exec speak? And I think 2015 was really when there was a big change, and that was the SDGs being ratified and the Paris Agreement. So the two things together, I think we suddenly saw a lot of it. There was a recognition with the SDGs, particularly, that we needed to engage business. So there was a lot of thought behind how do we engage business with these. They're a government's responsibility to achieve, but there's no way that governments can achieve it without business help.
Sure.
And how do we make business understand that actually it's not just a cost to them, it's actually a business benefit, and it's that, as well as being the right thing to do, it's actually it makes business sense as well. So there was a lot of work around how to engage business and get business sort of realizing the importance of is that sustainable development, is that balance between the environment and people and economics, and you need all three to be working together. You can't have one at the expense of another. And I think that recognition and business really sort of waking up and thinking, what do I need to do on these? There was a lot of senior people coming to us saying, well, my client's saying, what do we need to do on the SDGs? So I think that really, really raised awareness. And then at the same time, slowly but surely, there's more and more kind of natural disasters and floods and fires, and people recognizing that actually we're causing this, and it's becoming critical.
For sure.
So it's become much more strategic. But also then there's been a wealth of regulation coming in, particularly from the EU, from the standards boards and things. So there's been quite a hockey stick, I suppose, of activity, awareness, realization of its importance, and the need for everybody to act.
For sure, and I suppose that's probably been reflected in the size and scale of the practice and the growth of the number of people. So how many individuals do you actually have now focusing on this area?
Well, I would say it's increasing by the minute, but we've got about 10,000 people across the PwC network who are in a sustainability expert team. We've then got, thousands more that might be working in our energy business, and actually a huge amount of what we're doing in the energy business is all about energy transition. So there's actually more and more, everybody's work will have an element of sustainability about it, but it might not be, the lead thing. So it's about 10,000 people that are we consider are the experts, but then we're also trying to activate and raise awareness amongst the 320,000 people that we've got that makes people consider sustainability and think about what's important in everything that we do.
Sure, because I suppose it's slightly different given the lens at which you're coming to the market. But in the majority of organisations that we engage with, they understand that building this army of internal sustainability professionals isn't the way to build or embed a sustainable culture. It's about upskilling and educating the wider audience and the wider individuals within the firm to take that on as part of their role, even though it's not the main thing. But your role obviously helps facilitate that inside your business through growing your own talent, upskilling them further. I'm interested.
I should probably make the distinction. So my side of the business is working with the people who are then consulting to clients. So the client-facing teams. We also have our own corporate sustainability teams who are looking at what we as a firm are doing, or our net. So we've made a net zero commitment. We have commitments to communities and society. So we've made various commitments, and we have a whole team of people, in every territory who are looking at our own sustainability practices. Some of the things that I will focus on are things like upskilling. So we recognise that we've got some experts who've done, degrees, masters in particular areas of sustainability, but then for everyone in the firm, they need to understand what sustainability is, how it's relevant, what are the issues. So I've got quite a big team that is working just on upskilling. Sometimes it might be, we think about it by different cohorts. So there's the upskilling of the people who are delivering the sustainability work, and there's the upskilling of everybody in the firm by sort of different levels. So that there's a lot of upskilling, and it's quite tailored to the different communities that are needing it. If that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, and I suppose this is the really interesting part of your role is you play such a big part, I suppose, in the global state of play of sustainability, because the skills metric that you're developing is very focused on what's delivered into industry, into organizations, to give them either the advice, the guidance, the assurance to actually do what's needed. How do you, in an ever-changing landscape, build that skills metric, and I'm sure constantly evolving it to those niche skill sets that are required and different areas that are coming on the horizon every few minutes, it feels like now. What's your approach to that, and the sort of way in which you try to facilitate it positively?
Well, I guess we have to do a sort of a constant check-in of the skills that we've got across the network, and keep looking forward to what's happening either with regulations or with different organisations. So we're very active in things like, we were very active in the TCFD, the Task Force for Financial Related Climate Disclosures. We're very active. There's a similar organisation for nature-based disclosures. So we're active in helping to sort of develop what those standards might look like. Back many years ago, we were instrumental in writing things like the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So there's something about our work with organisations like the World Business Council for Sustainable Development or the World Economic Forum, those big NGOs who are really driving change, we would work with them on quite a lot of their forward-thinking programs that it will help, it helps us understand what the next, what's coming next. There's a big focus at the minute on all of the skills that are associated with the CSRD sort of skills matrix. So we've got a big focus on that at the moment, understanding all the different ESRSs and understanding what are the different skills we need under them and using that as a framework. But it might be that in 5 years' time, there's another set of regulations or standards that we use a different matrix for. So I think we're constantly changing and evolving the matrix depending on what the trajectory and direction of travel is.
Sure. And then how do you actually deliver that internally to your actual subject matter experts, but then also, I suppose, into the individuals that are doing other areas of practice but need to have a knowledge and understanding? What's the way in which you actually facilitate that?
In terms of developing skills?
So actually, yeah. So once you've built the metrics, how do you actually then develop the skills within the people within the firm?
Well, I think it's about recognizing the skills we've got and therefore the skills gaps. And then we work with, so say we had a gap with a pollution and we needed to develop, we would probably develop an e-learn or approach to pollution, working with a pollution specialist and finding a way then to roll that out. We've got lots of different communication channels. So I think that's one of the challenges when you've got an organisation as large as ours is how do you reach everybody? So we've got all sorts of intranets and newsletters and chat groups and lots of different ways to try and make contact with people to know that stuff exists, and to an extent allow people to self-serve. But we also then will coordinate through. We do a lot of coordination through the sustainability leaders in every territory. So they then help us communicate to the people in their teams. So it's that sort of, we think about cascades and who are key stakeholders and who we need to influence.
Sure. And are there minimum standards or expectation for anybody within the firm from a sustainability perspective now? So if somebody was to come into the tax business, is there a sustainability module that they have to, it has to be delivered for them, or do you have mandates around sustainability firm wide?
Well, it's not mandatory, but we have it's highly recommended, strongly encouraged.
Sure.
We have we do have a module that is sort of ESG and me. So what is E, what is S, what is G, as a basic level of understanding for everyone in the firm. And then we have things like a climate badge. So it's got external accreditation as a learning module, and we're encouraging as many people as possible to do that. But it's self-study and it's a few hours of self-study. So we've got quite a lot of people, several thousand people who have completed it, and another several thousand people who are in progress. But it's making things available that we think are tailored and user-friendly, and making as many people aware as possible. I think for the experts themselves that come into the specialist teams, they would tend to have. It's pretty rare that someone wouldn't have some level of degree or masters in sustainability if they were coming into the sort of the niche sustainability teams, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah, I understand. And in your role, you must have helped and supported thousands of people transition into sustainability, or at least accelerate their career in that space. What would you say are some of the key things or areas that people who are interested in going on that journey should consider, think about, focus on to enable them to successfully either pivot or just expand their horizon from a sustainability perspective?
I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting things to read. So just understanding and broadening. I think as soon as you start to broaden your horizons a bit, you then, mean, I think it's a bit like traveling. You travel to one place, you realize there's 17 other places you want to go to. So I think as soon as you start, unlayering the onion, there's so much more. So I think intellectual curiosity to learn. There's a lot of places to go, but I think some of the best business focused ones, I think, is like the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and they create a huge amount of content that's engaging, that's constantly being updated. So I think some of those kind of organizations are places to watch, to look at, and maybe attend. There's quite a lot of conferences and different things that you can attend, some of them virtually. So I think it's having that curiosity to explore, follow what interests you as well. So some people will be much more interested in the social aspect. Some people will be much more interested in particular environmental aspects. So I think there is an element of what do you find interesting as well, and just go with that.
For sure. And what would you say that your hopes are for the future of the profession? You play such a big part in it now within the firm, but what do you see as the next evolution or the next stage of the profession as years go by?
Well, it's almost that it's not a separate word. It's almost that it's so much business as usual that it's not a separate. It's not separate, but I think that's many years off. But I think the really key thing for me, and I think quite an aha moment with the SDGs, was this point about the balance between environment, people, and economics. So, you can't wag a finger at business and tell them they should do this or they should do that, because it still has to make economic sense, because they have to survive as a business. But actually, if you can combine things that are good for business whilst at the same time, not having a bad impact on the environment and being good for communities and people, then I think it becoming very much business as usual, that those three things are kept in equilibrium, and they're not. It's not down the end of a corridor. Sustainability is down there. It's across everything.
For sure. I suppose it goes back to that point of when you said that you've kind of first started and it was all about driving or maximizing shareholder value only, at the expense of anything else. That was the key focus. But we're certainly seeing that shift.
That's all that mattered in the 70s. Yeah. In the 70s, it was all about making money. It was just money, money, money. That's all that people cared about, really. And I think there's been a huge realization that that's been at quite a cost to the planet, and that, there's a great quote in Our Business, Our Planet, Our Business, which is an amazing film, actually. If you watch one thing, I think watch that. There's a quote that there'll be no jobs on a dead planet. So I think that's quite, that's stuck in my mind as a great quote.
For sure, absolutely. So thinking about your own legacy, I suppose, and when you are in your slippers at the end of your career and putting your feet up to relax, what do you think that by the end of your career you would like your legacy to be, to show that you've left the world better than you found it?
I think if we can have raised awareness with business and have business acting differently and considering impact. I think if business can be considering the impact they're making on people and on the environment, and that's built into decision making, it's built into people's way of thinking, I think that would be fantastic.
For sure. Well, a noble cause, and it sounds like from the stuff that you've already been doing that you're well on the way to helping that be a reality. Clearly, you're a very busy lady, and I appreciate that. But I'm sure there'll be people that have listened to this where lots of stuff has resonated with them. If they wanted to reach out to you or connect, would you be happy to for people to do so? And if so, where would be the best platform for them to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. My details are on the website. So Louise Scott, and there's a pwc.com /sustainability. So there's a website with my contact details, so you can send me an email.
Great. Well, we'll put that in the show notes so that people can click through it. Look, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for telling your story. It's a fascinating journey and one that's providing some real impact in the world. So thank you for all of that work that you're doing as well. Really appreciate the time of talking to you and getting to know you better. And I'm sure the audience is going to have really enjoyed it. So we'll have to catch up in a few years and see how it's all going. But thank you so much for...
I might be in my slippers by then.
Well, maybe. Who knows? But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
And a big thank you to you for inviting me, and a big thank you if anyone's made it as far as the end of this, then thank you for staying with us and for listening.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Louise. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Better Than We Found It. I hope you have found value from this to support your own purpose-led journey. This episode was brought to you by GS2 Partnership, my organisation focused on providing talent solutions for sustainably focused organisations. We are driven by our purpose of connecting the people who believe in leaving the world better than we found it. If you are looking for a partner to support you with your hiring plans, or you are looking for your own career next steps, please reach out to us or personally drop me a message on LinkedIn. It's great to hear from listeners to the podcast, and I would welcome the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for our next episode.